My name's Kaleb. I serve as the Director of Museum Operations here at the Seminary Ridge Museum. And today, obviously being Halloween, we want to talk about some stories that you're probably not going to hear otherwise when you visit the Ridge or our museum. So we figured this was kind of a unique opportunity to touch on some of those stories. I will give the kind of trigger warning, if you will, that there are a couple stories that talk about suicide here. So it's unfortunate, but it's one of the many realities that seminarians faced, and we will look at least in two cases of students that will attend the seminary here that unfortunately do commit suicide. So sorry to bring us down, but I promise we'll end on a high note. I promise. Yeah, we'll end with a much better story than that. But there are some real twists and turns as you go throughout today's program. There are some interesting stories that you'll be like, I never knew that. As Cody and I can attest, there are a lot of those stories. And there are lots of instances of fire. As you can probably guess, historic buildings, that's one of the greatest threats that they can face is fire. And we'll see a number of instances where this building will be rather close to becoming consumed in fire in several instances. So we'll dive into those stories now. So the first one is going to be a stray bullet strikes a house. So when we think of Gettysburg, right, our mind probably goes to those houses such as Shriver and whatnot that have all these bullet pockmarks all over them. But what if I told you probably the most recent battle damage, if we will, a bullet to a building does not occur in 1863, but rather in the 1990s. There is a bullet that will strike one of the seminary dorms just on the southern end of the campus here. So there is a deer that is struck on 116, and the police will arrive. And the officer that is dispatched, he decides to put that deer out of its misery, unfortunately, and he fires two bullets into that deer. Now, as you see through the highlighted portion here, it says the officer felt it was best to end the animal's suffering with a shot or two from his pistol. Unfortunately, this officer failed to consider the consequences of firing a .45 caliber bullet directly into pavement at close range. The slug of the second shot ricocheted off the surface of the Fairfield Road and traveled some 160 feet toward our apartment, penetrating the screen before striking the window frame and finally coming to a rest on the windowsill. We thank God no one was hurt.
And so,
do you really? Yes.
And I lived in Hagerstown before he was there, but yeah, we know Jim.
Yes. So an interesting story. So here we can see that clearly a bullet pockmark, if you will, is still evident here on the campus of the seminary. Not so long ago, 1996 is when this incident takes place. I can tell you, speaking from firsthand experience, earlier this year, Gettysburg Police Department will still do this. Over at Lee's headquarters, there was a deer that decided to jump the fence, and we had to call them, and they took care of our little incident there. So, still current. Now, moving along to back in time, if we will, back to 1913. When we think about 1913, there's a lot of historic things that occur in this building. Obviously, the dedication of the Peace Portico on the western side of the building. There's the reunion that takes place here with both northern and southern soldiers returning, staying in this building as a hotel. And then probably, if you've taken a cupola tour, you're familiar with the story of the seminary cupola being struck by lightning. Not usually a noteworthy event other than, in passing. But as we were doing research for this program, we came across a rather unusual newspaper article, which kind of piqued my interest here. It mentions the seminary struck, but then it also adds a new detail to the story that we had not been familiar with. And that is that Edward Shoup, who was an employee of the seminary, is actually in the building that is at the time of its being struck by lightning. And it says that he was thrown to the ground, but he suffers no major injury. And so that was now a new piece to this puzzle. And then an additional newspaper article that we found that is pertaining to the seminary lightning strike is from what will be eventually the mayor of Gettysburg. And he is going to write this account basically describing what he sees as a child coming up Seminary Ridge and witnessing the fire department struggle to battle the blaze on top of this building. He also will draw attention to the type of fire engine and some of the instruments that are being used to fight this fire. But the Silsby fire engine is a apparatus that the Gettysburg Fire Department will purchase in 1886, and it is this piece of apparatus that they're going to need desperately to fight this fire because it's 6 stories up on top of this ridgeline. And so in this account, he's describing how the first firefighters to arrive, they just have hoses with them. They hook it up to the hydrant, but as they're going up the side of this building on ladders, the water pressure isn't enough because of the hill, the water tank on the other side of town on East Cemetery Hill. It's about the same level as going up the side of this building. So they have to go back into town, back to the firehouse, find horses, because they didn't have horses at the fire department. They had to find horses to hook up to their engine, bring it here to the seminary, and then hook those hoses back up so they had enough pressure to reach the top of this building. So that was an interesting story as well. And then, of course, diving into that, because everything just leads into another rabbit hole, we found this image, which is when Gettysburg receives that fire engine. So you can see the Silsby here right in the middle. This is 1886 in January, and you can see there's a large parade of townsfolk that came out to celebrate this large purchase and investment that clearly paid dividends for them to have here, especially in 1913. And then that same engine is still on display in Gettysburg over at the fire department. You can see that in their small museum that's there. So that piece clearly plays a major role in saving this building from further damage. So if we look at the cupola here, again, nobody is probably going to spend as much time staring at the pictures of this building as we have. So I'll break that down for you, basically, what you're seeing here. So if we look in 1863, the Brady photo of this building, we can see some battle damage there to the top portion. And it almost has kind of like an ice cream scoop, perfect dome on top. 1895, there's a major renovation to this building. That's when we think that this dome kind of changes shape a little bit into a kind of a bell curve. And then when you see the cupola kind of go through the biggest renovation or change is going to be from that fire in 1913. This image is taken in 1933, and we can see some of those changes to the top portion. That ring around the top is present in the 1903. But of course, this changes quite drastically to 1933. The top finial part, you'll notice, looks the same in these two. There's some small additions to it. But everybody asks, or usually the common question or statement when we tell them that there's a fire because of lightning, they say, why didn't they have a lightning rod? Well, if we look closely at the 1863 image, you can actually see there is a copper piece that actually runs all the way down the side of the building coming out over here. So clearly there was something there. It just wasn't working or didn't work as effectively as it should have to prevent this fire from occurring. Now, sticking with the theme or idea of fires here, again, we mentioned there's a few that take place over the decades here. 1928, there's going to be a grass fire outside. It's just basically a rubbish fire that gets out of control thanks to the wind, but thanks to the fast-acting Gettysburg Fire Department, they are quickly able to put that out. And then in the building, there's going to be a dormitory fire that pretty much consumes the interior of a room on the 3rd floor of this building. It says that it cost about $25 worth of damage. Now, looking at inflation for that, it's about $600 today. So that's still not terrible, I guess, considering it could have been much, much worse. I would say that's probably mostly belongings to the student. But it started, they believe, from embers from a pipe. So smoking obviously is very dangerous, extra danger when you think that fire in an old building. And then if we look at a more unique fire, we'll look at the coal fire that starts spontaneously out in the coal bin of the powerhouse, which is across the street over there where that large chimney is today. It will take them about 4.5 hours for firefighters and seminary maintenance staff to get this blaze under control. 170 tons of coal will be ignited. So it takes them quite a while to try to get this under control, and they're kind of shoveling that coal out so they can get closer to those hot spots. And that takes place in 1948. And then if we get a little more recent here, we have two fires that will occur, one in a historic building that will survive the battle, but mostly will be gutted in 2004. That is the Krauth House to the north of this building on the other side of our chapel. And in 1994, there's a fire in the Bachman apartments. So that's basically right at the corner of 116 and Seminary Ridge here. Both are tied or believed to have been caused by stoves, cooking stoves in the kitchen. So pretty extensive damage to both of those, $25,000 to $30,000 worth of damage to the dorm room, and the Krauth house was again pretty much gutted from that fire. So the exterior brick was able to be saved, but the interior was pretty well damaged, and you can tell from the pictures here the amount of fire coming out of the windows there. Now this story is going to take a turn here. This is one of the stories that will reference suicide, but this is also going to play a role as well when we look at the fire aspect too. So this is the story of John Grimes. So Grimes is a seminary student who will attend the seminary, and he is going to have several instances where his name will appear in newspapers. The first time we see his name pop up is not with that more drastic suicide, but rather while he's still attending the seminary. He has a mysterious disappearance. And so he disappears from the seminary. His father is on his way from New Cumberland to visit him. They're supposed to have a meeting, but for whatever reason, when his dad arrives, Grimes is nowhere to be found. So they think that they're just on passing trains. He makes his way back home, and again, he's nowhere to be found. So there's several newspaper articles looking for this man. There's a second man that goes missing around that same time from New Cumberland. And we don't exactly know where he shows up or what happens, but we do know, based on the newspaper accounts, most of his friends are writing and saying that he is in some sort of melancholy state. He seems to be struggling with grades and whatnot. But all in all, he seemed to be doing well. So this catches them somewhat off guard. And same with his father. So we see those newspaper accounts continue. November 7th, 1893, they're still publishing that he's been missing, they can't find him, and that there's a second disappearance. People are starting to wonder, is there a connection to these two men going missing? And then November 9th, in Harrisburg, there's still no news of Grimes missing or his whereabouts. And so Grimes is kind of an oddity, right? We don't know what happens to him, but he eventually does seem to return to the seminary. He doesn't become a Lutheran minister. He will kind of have a change of heart and switches over to become a Methodist minister. The second time we see his name show up in the newspapers will be through one of his first suicide attempt. And it says here, about 12:30 o'clock, Russell Young, watchman of the engine house, heard two shots. He stepped to the door and discovered a man suffering from a bullet wound to his head. He was taken to the engine house and sent word to the police and the hospital. As the hospital, the physicians probed for the ball. It had entered the left side of the head, but could not be located. Thursdays, the x-rays were used to locate the bullet. Now, this newspaper account will go on to actually include part of Grimes' own description of what he says happened that night. And he says, at first, I left the Lafayette Hotel last night after supper and started to walk. I had no definite idea where I was going. Everything seemed to be a maze. When I got to that place, being the engine house, I drew my revolver out and shot myself in the head. I was melancholy and felt that I could not help myself. And so we're starting to see a pattern here that Grimes is suffering with a lot of mental health issues. And so this will be his first attempt at suicide. Well, he will successfully commit suicide here in 1912. And this is really where Grimes came to me the first time. I came across this newspaper account because of the highlighted portion that you see here. He tries to fire the seminary. So not only does he disappear while he's a student attending the seminary, but it says one of the stories told of his stay here is that he was found to have soaked his room at the seminary with kerosene, intending to set fire to the place. And so clearly, this is painting a more clear picture that he was suffering with some major mental health issues while he was here and then even after he left the seminary. So another interesting instance where this building came quite close to having a major fire that would have completely destroyed this building. Now, if we look to another instance where we see seminarians affected, this will be a drowning of not one but two seminarians who, while they are here, they are over on Willoughby's Run. They are with about 8 or 9 other folks, and they're in these 2 boats going down the stream over there. And it says appears to be some sort of dam. There's a deeper water area, and they all seem to be together when one of the boats capsizes. And as we can see here, there's a fairly good description of what happens to this party. It says a party of 5 or 6 students were boating in 2 separate boats. Kohler and Schindel and Metzgar forming one party, while yet in a shallow water, Schindel was thrown out of the boat. Afterwards, when they were already in deep water, Schindel upset his own boat, throwing the party out. Metzgar caught hold of the other boat and upset it also. Metzgar reached the shore, undressed, hastened to rescue his companions. With the assistance of Mr. Carroll, who was near at hand, all were brought on land but Mr. Kohler and Schindel. The last that Mr. Schindel was heard to say was, "I can swim." But hearing Kohler exclaim, "I cannot," he said, "Well, Billy, I will help you." It is supposed that Kohler grasped hold of Schindel and dragged him with him. The bodies were found about 9 p.m. that evening. They were both young men of more than ordinary promise. And so this is one of those stories that, again, unless you would have come to this talk, you've probably not heard of. But this is a story that affects the seminary, and certainly several years later, in 1942, we see this story retold in a newspaper, the Gettysburg Times, saying one of the saddest events in the history of the seminary took place on May 8th, 1878, when William Kohler and Alter Y. Schindel, members of the junior class, were drowned. And goes on to a little more detail there as well. And then we see that same accounting over in the York Dispatch in 1878, letting folks over in York know as well, since Kohler from Danville and Schindel of Hanover were both well known in the area. And Kohler actually preaches 2 weeks before his sad passing at a Easter service, his first sermon that he will deliver. And so here we see a historic map here. This would be Willoughby's Run, kind of skirting the western side of Gettysburg, and there being the seminary in the kind of yellow portion up at the top. So it's somewhere probably along the lower portion where it gets a little wider is where this will all transpire. And this is an image of both of their headstones, and they, of course, are noted in the seminary history along with their class roster, and of course their death dates are noted as well. So you can see everybody else has these long kind of descriptions of where they go, what they study, and where they will eventually have a calling, but theirs are obviously notably short because of that. And here we have our second seminarian who will actually pass away here on the seminary campus. So this one comes through the great research of Cody Aish, also in our crowd here today. He found this story of Reverend Daniel Luther Barclay, who is a 24-year-old Shippensburg native here studying at the seminary, and he will unfortunately pass away just outside of this building. He will leap, it says, from the 3rd floor of this building from his room. He comes in, he has a brief conversation with some other seminarians here on the 1st floor. He'll make his way upstairs to his room and will unfortunately decide to jump. They will find a note that he leaves behind for his family, but we don't know what was in that note. That note was never published, but unfortunately this will be one of the seminarians who will actually pass away on the grounds here. And so here is an image of his headstone. He's actually buried over in Evergreen National Cemetery here in Gettysburg. The note, as addressed here in this newspaper article as well, says that it was delivered to his parents in Shippensburg. Again, that's 1938, excuse me. Now this story is the one that caught me off guard the most. Working in this building, I thought for sure I would have come across this at some other point, other than through one of our maintenance guys. So Randy, who has worked for the seminary for quite some time, he was painting the exterior of the Schmucker house, and we were chatting as I was coming in the one morning about burglar alarms here. And it's notorious for us to get burglar alarms, especially in the middle of the night. Bats and whatnot seem to find their way into this building. And we have motion sensors throughout the building, including the attic. So unless the Navy SEALs are dropping in from the cupola, I don't necessarily know why that's needed, but they're there. And Randy went on to explain that, well, it's probably because they felt the need to go overkill with some of these sensors because there was a burglary in the building. I said, whoa, what do you mean there's a burglary? It's never heard of this. He said, yeah, absolutely. And he goes on to tell me this story, and I was like, this, either Randy's making this up and that's absolutely crazy, or like, what? Like, I couldn't fathom that I hadn't heard about this before. So immediately get on newspapers.com, start searching all the keywords, and sure enough, there it is, 1994. There's a newspaper article, and there's several newspaper articles pertaining to this instance. So a burglary will occur in this building while the Adams County Historical Society will be in here. He breaks into the second story window right off of the portico there, and he steals an estimated $60,000 to $80,000 worth of artifacts, including an identified surgeon's kit, and one, probably the most notable in our instance here, will be a prayer book that was blood-soaked from a Confederate who was killed here at Gettysburg. And so there are many pieces that are stolen, but most, if not all of them, except for this prayer book, will be returned. I also found it interesting that the item value greatly differs from what they were first estimated that value at, $7,500, and that quickly jumps to $80,000. So yeah, a little bit of a difference there. And here is our part.
Feel better. It recently happened in Paris too.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I'd like to say this is before all of our technology and sensors, and yeah. And there is our Park Service hero. So he is who finds our artifacts. So they were out behind the Peace Light. His name is David Lutz. He was cleaning some trash, and he finds a blanket with all of these, what he thought initially were reproductions, and then he comes to learn, no, these look original. And there are, most of those items were able to be returned to the Historical Society. Just crazy turn of events there.
So you never got the prayer book back, you said?
To my knowledge, yeah, everything that I found says that prayer book was still missing. So interesting, but that's not where the story ends, right? So we think we know who committed this crime, interesting enough. Paul Stein. Well, Paul has a mystery of his own. So Paul actually goes disappearing later that year. So as he's being investigated by Gettysburg police for this theft, this newspaper article pops up here. It says the 27-year-old man apparently last seen by his older brother, John, around 1:30 or 2:30 Saturday, May 27th. The two men have been drinking beer while sitting in a quarry not far from Dorothy's home. Dorothy's his sister. Paul was reported as a missing person Sunday, May 28th. Say the two women, but police say that it may have been 3 days since after that night. And so there's a big police search for Paul. They bring out canines. They actually send some scuba divers out to this quarry, and they don't find his body or any evidence, in fact, that he was there. Well, fast forward, and they do find his body in this quarry. And so, unfortunately, the police are not able to conclude their investigation with any sort of formal burglary charges because Paul will unfortunately pass away from this incident. When you see down here the very last line, Stein was wanted by the Gettysburg Borough Police in connection with a burglary at the time he was reported missing. And so he will be, he's actually buried here in Gettysburg as well, over in Evergreen Cemetery. So many fascinating connections and stories there. But that story isn't over. So when we look at it does. When I say I stumbled on a rabbit hole that just kept going, it just kept going. I was like, okay, surely that could be all. Nope. But wait, there's more, I promise. Yeah. So through this investigation, there will be a police officer. He's Corporal Hoff, and he will take a special interest in that prayer book. And that prayer book, he'll go on to find a whole lot of information about this soldier. And his name was William McLeod. And McLeod will eventually have this entire book written about him, thanks to that same police officer, Michael Hoff. And so he is going to write a book, which I didn't know it at the time, but we sold it at one point in time in our gift shop. And I said, Cody, man, this name sounds so familiar. Where did I see this? I know I've seen this copy. He's like, yeah, we sold that. I'm like, of course we did, yes. So we sold the gentleman's book here, which his prayer book was stolen from this building just about 30 years ago. So kind of a crazy coincidence there. And as I was doing the research into this and found out, okay, this is a police officer turned historian, turned author, I thought, wow, surely there's going to be lots of research done into this story, because it seemed to be quite a captivating story. We came across several articles here. The first one there on the left side of the screen is actually an obituary for the officer, who will pass away in 1996. He was just 48 years old. He suffered a major heart attack, but of course it mentions that he was the author of this memoir. And then this image on the right side of the screen is from a website that we came across that was actually published earlier this month, 2025. And so the coincidences there were absolutely, we're sitting there like, this can't be right. Like, how is it that this story, man who writes this book now has a whole website article dedicated to this story? Surely there had to be some weird mix up there, but nonetheless, it is real. If you go to the GettysburgCivilianNetwork.com and search Hoff or McLeod, you'll come across this article, and it does a deep dive into the officer, his interest, and his publication of this book. So a truly fascinating story, one that, again, taking it from our maintenance guy all the way down the rabbit hole to, there's a book published that we sold in our gift shop for a while. It was just kind of one of those mind-blowing moments. Gettysburg has a lot of those, and especially working here, nothing feels like a coincidence. Like, there's so many coincidences that you're like, there's no way that just happened. But I promise I didn't publish this. It just worked out that way, that about, 3 weeks ago, I think, is when this was first published. So there are dozens of fascinating stories like that. And so I hope these were some of the stories that you hadn't heard before, that you probably, unless you were doing weird research like we all do, you probably wouldn't have come across a lot of these. So that is this installment, if you will, of Strange Stories, until I come across some more. Well, if you have any, I'd be interested to hear if you have any strange stories that relate to this building or the seminary campus.